Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 181. Introverts, develop, but don't compromise who you are. The inspiration for this week's episode came from another little rant I had on my personal Facebook page. It prompted a few comments and some discussion there, so I thought I'd share it here with you too. I think it'll only be a short episode, so stay tuned and let me know what you think in an email or on a review. Oh, and there's a big aha coming at the end, so don't miss that. This topic came off the back of an amazing few days away with 26 other business owners. And yes, I found time to escape when I needed to, and they all knew that I'd be likely to do that as I'd shared about me and my business. On this retreat, we were focusing on content creation and how to attract the right kind of clients. I'm not really sure that this podcast or my earlier Facebook posts meet all of the recommended criteria, but they do meet one, and it's one very important criteria. It's the importance of showing up honestly, warts and all, idiosyncrasies and all, beliefs and ethics and positions on show for all to see. Anyone in business who has an online presence knows that these kinds of honest posts usually cost you some followers. You watch as your audience numbers dip, sometimes they fall off a cliff actually, and they often attract the trolls and the naysayers. I've had to develop quite a thick skin in this online world because the rationale is that the ones who leave or try to discredit you were never the right kind of audience anyway. If they can't take the real me, they're not going to be influenced by my ideas. Makes me sound like an influencer, which I'm not sure I am yet. Well, not that kind of influencer anyway. But I do consider myself to be a thought leader. That's one of the brave steps I've taken in my own mind, owning that label of thought leader. So what was this post, you might be asking yourself? It was in a group that I follow, and it was advising on how to become the most interesting person in the room. A few decades ago, when I was still trying to be more extroverted in order to fit in and get on, because I was still unsure of my own self-worth, I would probably have leapt at that opportunity to be the most interesting in the room. That's what happens when you've internalised the messages over the decades of being told that you're boring, or in the case of an old colleague, dull as yeah, you know the end of that. The pull of being perceived as being interesting would have been irresistible to me. I remember taking a profile early on in my online career, and I came out as a mystique personality. I quite liked that label. In fact, I still do. Here are some of the mystique language traits, and I think they're very representative of me. Listening, think before speaking, observers, problem solvers, hard to read as a mystique, logical, independent, can keep calm under pressure, don't care about being behind the scenes, objective and analytical, mysterious. So that would imply that maybe I'm interesting by being mysterious, by holding back and by being hard to read. Anyway, it's taken me so long to move beyond a need to feel interesting in the traditional sense. Following Wayne Dyer's advice that what you think of me is none of my business was difficult yet crucial on my own personal development journey. I had been a lifelong people pleaser and a perfectionist in Taby Carla's terms,
And we all have our own mix of these motivating drivers. They develop through our formative years and are pretty well embedded in our subconscious by adulthood. So if we want to reduce their power, we have to start with increasing our self-awareness. I now refer to myself as a recovering people pleaser and a recovering perfectionist, as they will always have an influence over me, but just not a grip over my behaviour. This is another example of where I've needed to be braver in my own life, as I was choosing to let go of things I had always been praised for pleasing people and doing things really well. What would you let go of or do differently if you were braver? These days, my focus is somewhat different. My intention more recently has been to become the most interested person in the room rather than the most interesting. This sees me showing respect to other people in my world, paying them attention by being fully present and listening empathically. When I'm interested, we can get into really generative conversations, and they are the kind of conversations I adore. Now, cards on the table, showing this level of interest in people who talk at me, who don't respect other people's space, and who make it all about them is so difficult for me. And I've been in the company of people like that quite a few times. I'm okay for a while and then I tune out. My mind starts wandering. I get a bit judgmental about their hogging the airtime, and I don't think I wear my indoor face either. I used to try harder to hide what I'm feeling than I do now because, as Wayne Dyer said, what you think of me is none of my business actually. I'm not rude to people, and if they had sufficient emotional intelligence, they'd notice my expression. But typically they don't, because they haven't understood the impact of their behaviour. Maybe they don't want to, and that, of course, is their prerogative. Introverts like me are often subjected to this when people assume we don't have anything to say, when what we're actually doing is just showing them the respect of listening. My husband used to refer to people like this as the when I's. When I was ... when I did ... XXX, when I made ... YYY. You get the idea. You know that quietly gutsy is one of my business principles, informed by my personal values. So if I get the chance, I offer these people feedback. I am so much better at the difficult conversations than I used to be. But honestly, they rarely take me up on my offer. Why? Well, I think, and it's only a proposition of mine, it's because the most interesting person is not often interested in learning about themselves and raising their self-awareness. They can be surprisingly fragile and trying too hard or masking their insecurities. I've found this often to be true of bullies too, and let me state quite clearly, I'm not suggesting that the person trying to be interesting is always a bully. So, by all means, develop your abilities to tell relevant stories, to ask engaging questions, to interact naturally. But please don't bend yourself so far out of shape that you become the bore who thinks they're interesting. You don't need to hold court. You don't need to entertain for the sake of it. And you don't need to share everything about yourself and your work. Read the room. Read the energy. Read the faces of the people you're interacting with. Show interest in them and give them space to show interest in you. All of these things can be improved as you consciously develop your emotional and social intelligence. Check out Daniel Goleman's work on these two aspects of intelligence. It's actually about reciprocity for me. The more present we are in each other's company, the more we find to be interested in and the more interesting we become, the more genuine our conversations, and the deeper we begin to understand one another. And my big aha? Thanks for sticking around for it. And I'm probably a bit slower on the uptake than you, so you might have got there well before me. My aha was when I finally realised that the most interesting person really isn't the one with the most to say, or the most knowledge, or the biggest energy, or the most attractive. Interesting might just be the enigmatic person in the room, or the mysterious one who asks lots of questions but doesn't give much away, or the one dancing to their own tune. And I always have a tune playing in my head that I'm either dancing to or moving to. So you see, I jumped to a conclusion right at the start about what interesting meant, and I have now shifted my perception quite radically. Another example of becoming braver. And if you're interested in becoming braver, check out the link in the show notes and join my Summer Sizzler, those 3 sessions all about becoming braver. Now, do you want to be interesting or interested? I'm thinking a balance of the both might be the ideal for me, especially in light of my reframe about what interesting means. That way we can be fully, gloriously and unashamedly ourselves, which takes the pressure off us and those we're speaking with. And I invite you to consider that little shift too. Don't think about it as talking to someone. Think about it as talking with them. That small reframe makes the world of difference.
If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.